Have you ever looked in the mirror and realized the face staring back is no longer entirely your own? There are days you wake up carrying a sadness with no clear origin, holding an anger in your chest that does not belong to you, or bearing a shame you never created. And you ask yourself, why do I feel this way? Is this really me? For many empaths, this is a familiar experience. They enter life like delicate vessels, sensitive, attuned to the subtle signals of the world around them. They believe that absorbing the pain of others is love, is compassion, is a sacred gift bestowed by fate. But Carl Jung, with his piercing insight, left us a hidden warning. When you take in what is not yours, you are no longer a healer. You become possessed. In a relationship with a narcissist, this danger multiplies. Narcissists never face their own shadow. They project it outward, searching for a container for a soul, sensitive enough, hungry enough for love, to become a living altar for the demons they deny. And the empath, with their wide open heart, unwittingly becomes the sacrifice. But what happens when one day the empath sees the truth and decides to return those demons? What happens when they stop absorbing, stop being the vessel, and instead become the mirror? This is not merely a shift within a relationship. It is a spiritual event, a turning point in the journey of individuation, and a warning Jung himself wanted us to heed. In today's talk, I will guide you deep into that journey, the journey of returning the darkness, reclaiming soul sovereignty, and transforming from a possessed vessel into a mirror of illumination. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear may shake the very way you understand love, empathy, and your own true self. An empath is not simply born out of kindness. In truth, most are forged from childhood, raised in environments where their safety depended entirely on reading the emotions of others. A child growing up with volatile parents, or in a household filled with conflict, learns one survival law. If I can sense someone's anger, sadness, or coldness before it arrives, I can avoid it or soothe it. As Jung once said, what we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. Children don't realize they are training a survival skill. They only know their soul is developing a hypersensitive antenna, scanning for every shift in the emotional atmosphere. Over time, that antenna becomes their identity. People call it the gift of empathy, but at its root it is defense. When they grow older, empaths carry this habit into every relationship. They hear sighs no one else notices. They feel the subtle vibration of shame, the weight of repressed anger, even when no words are spoken. And instead of just recognizing, they absorb. They take it all inside, as if carrying it could somehow save the other person. But here lies the danger. When you continuously carry emotions that are not yours, you lose the boundary between me and the other. At some point, you look in the mirror and are no longer sure if you are living your own essence or just the reflection of someone else's shadow. And this is precisely why narcissists find you so easily. They carry within themselves an abyss of shame and rage they refuse to face. They hurl it outward through projection, and you, with your open vessel, with your reflex of caring for others, become the perfect container. In other words, the empath becomes the scapegoat archetype, not because they are weak, but because their nervous system has been wired to take in what others discard. And in relationship with a narcissist, that wiring turns into chains. The narcissist does not arrive with cruelty right away. They are like the vampires of myth at first enchanting, with sweet whispers and promises of eternal devotion. We are destiny. Only you can truly understand me. These are the invitations to open the heart. But the gift they seek is not love, it is blood, the very essence of life, your spiritual vitality. The empath, full of compassion, believes they were chosen to heal a wounded soul. They open themselves like an altar in a dream. They do not realize they have just signed an invisible contract, the contract of becoming a living sacrifice. From here, the possession begins. Drop by drop, the narcissist pours into the empath all the emotions they cannot face. A denied shame becomes guilt in your chest. A suppressed rage becomes fire burning in your stomach. A hidden sense of worthlessness becomes a voice in your head whispering, I am not enough. I am wrong. Gradually, the empath loses the ability to distinguish between their own emotions and projected darkness. They begin to live in a fog where identity dissolves. They think love means carrying burdens. They believe self-sacrifice is the path to healing. But in reality, they have been possessed. In the language of depth psychology, this is no longer love. It is the incarnation of another's unconscious. The empath is no longer a healer. They have become the scapegoat. And the cruel irony is that they name this sacrifice kindness. But remember, in every vampire myth, there is one unbreakable law. The vampire can only enter your home if you invite it. The narcissist is the same. They can only pour their shadow into you when you open the door of your heart without discernment, when you mistake absorbing darkness for loving. And as Jung warned, this is the most dangerous confusion. Because from that moment on, you are no longer living for yourself. You become the vessel for demons that are not yours. You wake in the morning, look into the mirror, and see a face no longer whole, a face clouded by fragments of someone else's soul. One day, after years of living in the fog of borrowed emotions, the empath's body and spirit begin to cry out. It may come as chronic back pain with no explanation, a fatigue that lingers, or recurring dreams of being chased, drowned, hunted. This is not random. It is the voice of the unconscious. Jung emphasized, what you repress in consciousness will return as destiny. And the destiny of the empath is the moment they must discern what is theirs and what is not. At first, awakening comes as a whisper. Is this feeling truly mine? The moment that question is spoken, a crack of light pierces the veil of shadow. From there, they begin to realize, for years they have carried shame, rage, and emptiness that never belonged to them. And this truth is both painful and liberating. In that moment, the empath understands. Love does not mean absorption. Compassion is not the same as sacrifice. Healing is not about becoming a warehouse for shadows. And here, a revolutionary act occurs. They decide to return the demons. Picture this. In a dream, you see vicious dogs chasing you, symbols of another's repressed anger. Instead of running until collapse, you turn, look straight at them and say, "You do not belong to me. Go back to your master." The moment you speak it, the dogs vanish. This is not cruelty, it is individuation, the process Jung described as separating your own being from the unconscious of others. When the empath returns the darkness, they do not return it with revenge or hate, they return it with the mirror. They say, "I see your rage, but it is not my coat. I see your shame, but it is not my skin." And in that reflection, the narcissist, whether they want to or not, must face the very shadow they once denied. This is the tragic turning point. The narcissist survives by projection. When no one absorbs it anymore, the darkness returns to them. They panic, they attack, they cry, they accuse. "You betrayed me, you never loved me." But these are only the screams of a soul forced to confront its own abyss. For the empath, this moment feels like a dark night of the soul, because when they stop carrying, the relationship built on possession collapses. They lose the illusion of love. They lose the role of savior. They must step into the silence of emptiness, facing the fear that they are cruel, that they are abandoning. But this emptiness is not the end. It is the purest space, the sacred clearing, where their true essence can finally emerge for the very first time. And that is Jung's hidden warning. If the empath does not dare to return what isn't theirs, they dissolve into the shadows of others, lose their own identity, and become a graveyard of rejected souls. But if they have the courage to return it, they awaken the highest power, the power of a sovereign soul, one that cannot be possessed. When the empath decides to return the demons that do not belong to them, one door closes and another opens. Yet this moment of transition is anything but gentle. It feels like an inner earthquake, where two worlds tremble at once, the world of the narcissist and the world of the empath themselves. First, look at the narcissist's reaction. Jung once said, "What we refuse to confront will return as fate." And fate, for the narcissist, is the moment when no one carries their burden anymore. The empath had been the filter of their shadow, the vessel for their shame, rage, and emptiness. Once that vessel is gone, they spiral into the state of an addict deprived of a drug. The first reaction is rage. They lash out. "You've changed, you're cruel, you never loved me." This is the fury of an ego unmasked. Next comes manipulation, pleading, playing the victim, staging emotional performances. And if that fails, they may turn dangerous sabotage, smear campaigns, unleashing flying monkeys to surround you. None of this comes from love. It is the torment of being forced to take back their own demons. Meanwhile, within the empath, the opposite process begins a rebirth. At first, there is a hollow emptiness that frightens them. They wonder, am I cruel for refusing to carry? Am I selfish for putting this burden down? But if they remain steadfast, they realize that emptiness is not an ending, but a cleansing. It is new soil where the seeds of their true self begin to sprout. The empath learns that love is no longer absorption, but reflection. Empathy is no longer sacrifice, but discernment. Healing is no longer carrying for another, but inviting them to face themselves. And from that moment, they enter what Jung called the sovereignty of the soul. In this state, the empath is no longer easily possessed by darkness. They become a mirror, a still lake in which everyone is forced to see themselves. Living in this sovereignty, they not only free themselves, but also contribute to awakening the collective field of humanity. For every time one person dares to return what is not theirs, a piece of humanity's shadow is returned to its rightful owner. Here lies the paradox. The narcissist falls into chaos, while the empath steps into peace. One panics because for the first time they must face their own darkness. The other, after years of being lost, finally encounters their true essence. This is the double consequence, both violent and regenerative. Carl Jung emphasized, "The shadow that an individual refuses does not vanish. It is carried by the collective." This means what we refuse to face in ourselves does not only haunt us, it burdens the whole community. And throughout history, certain groups have been forced to bear this collective shadow for others. Empaths are one such group. Picture this. In every family, there is one child who is always the listener, the caretaker. They learn to swallow conflict, to keep the dinner table peaceful. They learn to smile, to cover their parents' sadness. They learn to become the emotional filter so the family system can function, and when they grow up, they carry this habit into the world. On a larger scale, humanity has done the same for centuries. We've cast our shame, rage, and violence onto minority groups, onto collective scapegoats. The Jews in history, the witches of the Middle Ages, or any community branded as carriers of society's evil. This is collective projection. And when an empath absorbs the shadow of a narcissist, they are repeating this ancient pattern in miniature. So what happens when the empath returns it? It is not just an act of personal liberation, it is a shockwave through the collective unconscious. Because when you refuse to be someone's emotional landfill, you are also refusing the archetypal role of scapegoat that humanity has assigned for millennia. You break an ancient cycle. Imagine thousands, even millions of empaths realizing this truth at once. They rise and declare, "I will not carry for you. I return what is not mine." What follows? All the shadow once hidden and stored in the collective unconscious is forced back to its true owner, humanity itself. And as Jung described, when the shadow returns, society trembles. This is why today's world seems more chaotic than ever. Extreme politics, erupting violence, widespread psychological crises. This is not the end of the world, it is purification. These are collective demons being returned, forcing humanity to confront them. Empaths are no longer silently carrying them on our behalf. And though painful, this is humanity's chance to enter a new stage, collective individuation. In the larger picture, every awakened empath is a fragment of the mirror. When they return the darkness, they not only force the narcissist to face themselves, but they spark a chain reaction. Society itself must look into the shadow it has denied for thousands of years. This is both personal and mystical. It transforms the empath from a sacrifice into a keeper of light for the community. And here, we understand why Jung called this the painful but only path to wholeness. Because no personal liberation is separate from collective liberation. When one person returns the shadow, they participate in the healing of the world. Jung once said, "The unconscious does not speak in words, it speaks in symbols." That is why, in the seasons when empaths are possessed by a narcissist shadow, their dreams become mystical stages where truth is revealed in images. What they deny by day returns at night in visions, both fierce and haunting. One of the most common dreams empaths report is being chased by wild dogs. Dogs, in the language of the unconscious, often symbolize instinct, aggression, repressed rage. But when analyzed closely, it becomes clear this rage is not their own. It is the narcissist anger they have absorbed. They dream of running endlessly, exhausted, with the dogs still snarling behind them. The unconscious is saying, "You cannot run forever with what is not yours. It is time to turn and return it to its true master." And so, another symbol that often appears is a flood or a scene of drowning. One woman shared that she often dreams of being swallowed by the ocean, struggling but unable to breathe. This is not her private sorrow, but a collective grief she carries for her parents, her lover, her friends. The unconscious uses the image of water symbol of emotion to show that she is being submerged by borrowed feelings. The message: "This is not your river. Let it go so it can return to its source." Others dream of fire. They see themselves standing in a burning house or holding a blazing torch. Fire here is a double symbol, both destruction and purification. The unconscious is saying, what you are carrying, the narcissist's rage, humiliation, and shame, must be burned away. And the fire will not consume you, it will only consume what does not belong to you. Upon waking, empaths often feel an uncanny lightness, as if an invisible film has just been cleansed. A shattered mirror is also a classic dream. One sees themselves in a mirror. Then the image fractures, revealing distorted, grotesque faces behind it. This is a direct metaphor for projection. What they see daily, the narcissist's charm and power, is only a mask. When the mirror breaks, the truth appears, a fragmented, incomplete soul hiding behind layers of disguise. The message: do not confuse image with essence. The darkness you carry is not yours, it is theirs. And many empaths also dream of lugging heavy bags or carrying corpses down endless corridors. This is the unconscious speaking plainly. You are carrying what is dead, putrid emotions, memories that are not yours. Once in the dream, they set the bags down or lay the bodies on the ground. They awaken with a weightless feeling, evidence that the unconscious is teaching them how to return what isn't theirs. Why does the unconscious use dreams? Because in waking life, empaths often rationalize everything. They tell themselves, I must endure, I must save them, I must love unconditionally. But at night, reason loosens and primordial images rise. Dreams become the hidden teacher, a dark sage, forcing you to confront the truth you avoid by day. Note well, dreams never issue direct commands. They speak through symbols. Running equals avoidance. Drowning equals over-absorption. Burning equals purification. Shattered mirror equals mask dissolving. Heavy bags equals burdens. Every dream is a map. Return what is not yours. Many ancient cultures understood this long ago. In Greece, Persephone eats the pomegranate seeds to accept that darkness exists, but she does not absorb it. In the East, snake dreams are often signs of metamorphosis. The snake returns to its den not to kill, but to shed its old skin. The personal unconscious harmonizes with the collective unconscious, using symbols to push the empath toward the turning point, separating themselves from another's shadow. What matters is that empaths learn to interpret their dreams. Instead of fear, ask, what is the message here? Is this my shadow or someone else's? Each time you ask that question, you create a small distance between yourself and the shadow. That distance is the beginning of sovereignty. And when empaths begin practicing returning through symbol, visualizing in meditation that they set the burden down, or in prayer saying, I return this to you. It does not belong to me. They free not only the mind but the body. Many who suffered chronic pain, insomnia, or nervous exhaustion suddenly feel physically lighter after performing this returning rite in a dream or meditation. Jung called this the language of the unconscious, a language beyond reason that nonetheless wields a healing power reason can never achieve. Once an empath understands this language, they are no longer prisoners of haunting dreams. They become companions, listeners, apprentices of their own unconscious. When you dare to face it, the dogs stop chasing, the waters stop submerging, the flames stop consuming. When you dare to put the burden down in a dream, you wake with unburdened shoulders. When you dare to let the mirror break, you see the truth. And that is the unmistakable sign that you are on the right path, the path of returning the darkness, the path toward individuation wholeness. Imagine one morning you open the window and breathe deeply. The air is the same as any other day, yet something has changed. Your heart carries no invisible weight. You no longer wake to nameless sadness or anger from nowhere. You feel simply light. Light as if you have just repaid a debt that was never yours. Light as if at last you have returned the shadows that never belonged to you. This is the moment the empath steps into sovereignty, the soul's authority. They are no longer a vessel, they become a mirror. In this state, a clear distinction takes shape. What is me? What is the other? If before, the empath dissolved into others and lost themselves, now they learn to stand apart, not with coldness, but with clarity. They can look directly at the narcissist, see the allure, see the cracks, see the projections, and no longer be drawn in. Carl Jung called this living from the self, the archetype of wholeness. When you stand in the self, darkness may be thrown at you, but it does not stick. Demons may knock, but they cannot enter, because within you, a center has formed, steady as a mountain, bright as a torch. This does not mean the empath becomes barren or cruel. On the contrary, they grow warmer, but it is a warmth with boundaries. They can love, but not by self-sacrifice. They can listen, but not by absorption. They can be with others, but without losing themselves. And here lies Jung's hidden warning. If you do not reach this state, you will dissolve into the shadows of others. But if you dare to return and stand firm in sovereignty, you not only save yourself, you become a light for others. When the empath becomes a mirror, they do something very dangerous to the narcissist. They reflect the truth. With no one left to absorb, no one left to carry, the narcissist looks at the empath and for the first time sees their own shadow. That is why narcissists often despise, attack, or flee from an awakened empath, not because the empath failed, but because they succeeded. In relationship, this creates a root-level change. If once the empath was swept into the cycle of idealization, devaluation, discard, that cycle now stops. The empath no longer reacts, no longer argues pointlessly, no longer accepts blame that isn't theirs. They simply stand there, reflecting, and in that stillness their full power is revealed. At a deeper level, sovereignty opens a new form of love, a love no longer confounded with possession, but built on recognition. I see you with light and shadow. I see me with light and shadow. We do not meet to save each other, but to illumine each other. This is true love. The love Jung called conjunctio oppositorum, the union of two wholes, not two fragments trying to fuse. In everyday life, an empath in sovereignty will feel bodily changes too. Fewer minor illnesses, fewer aches, because the body no longer serves as a cemetery of emotions for others. They have energy to create, to learn, to love, instead of being drained by invisible burdens. Their dreams change as well. No more fleeing, no more drowning. Now they stand, walk, even take flight. Sovereignty is not a permanent destination. It is a daily practice. Each time an empath asks, "Is what I'm feeling mine or someone else's?" they safeguard their sovereign ground. Each time they refuse to carry shame that isn't theirs, they fortify the borders of the soul. Day by day, they become a clear being, a soul that cannot be possessed. When empaths are still possessed by a narcissist shadow, they often mistake love for sacrifice. They think love means carrying burdens, that devotion equals endurance, that unconditional tolerance is the highest compassion. In truth, that is not love, it is collusion with darkness. When they step into sovereignty, this veil falls. They discover a simple yet profound truth. Love is not absorption, it is recognition. What is recognition? It is when I see you both your light and your shadow, and do not confuse them with mine. I do not need to carry them, nor erase them. I only need to see clearly and accept, this is you. At the same time, I see myself light and shadow, and do not cast them onto you to carry. This is the meeting of two mature souls. Jung called such love conjunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites. Not two broken pieces fused into something whole, but two wholes meeting, illuminating one another, and expanding together. In love, after returning the shadow, the empath is no longer drawn to the narcissist. The narcissist's allure only works when you are deprived, when you unconsciously try to heal your own wound by saving another. Once you have faced and integrated your own shadow, you no longer need to absorb someone else's. You do not seek someone to rescue. You seek someone who can walk beside you. And so new relationships form. Not whirlpools of enchantment and ruin, but encounters where both keep their identity. There, silence is no longer frightening, because it is not punishment, it is space for two souls to breathe. Conflict is no longer a threat, but a chance to illuminate another corner of shadow. Intimacy is no longer turned into possession, but becomes a dance between two free currents of energy. The true love of an empath after sovereignty is a love that does not devour, imprison, or become a contract of "I endure" in exchange for affection. It is the love of freedom, to love without owning, to be with without controlling, to accompany without carrying another's load. In real life, this love may look quieter. No more dramatic waves, no more extreme emotional theatrics. But within that quiet is uncommon depth. It is the feeling that you can breathe fully next to someone. That you need no mask, no stray, no proof, only presence. And here the empath realizes, true love could never exist before they return the demons. Only when they stand firm in their own being can love arrive as a pure current, untainted by possession, uncolored by fear. They have traveled from sacrifice to sovereignty, from vessel to mirror, and now from mirror into love, a love Jung would likely call the love of souls that have grown up.